When we hear the word Persia, images of palaces, carpets, poets, and star-studded domes spring to mind. But beyond this beauty lies something else. Persia preserved not only culture, but also knowledge that even its guardians feared. Some texts have disappeared, others have been deliberately distorted, but some remain, in the sand, in the ruins, in the whisper of the wind between black walls. In this episode, we will follow in the footsteps of 10 Persian mysteries that neither history nor archaeology has explained. Because there are things no one was meant to remember, but stone has a long memory, and perhaps what we learn in the future will change our world forever. City under salt. Deep in Dashti Kavir, the most lifeless place on the map of Iran, hides something that shouldn't exist. The salt desert, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, seems dead. But in one area, where the surface cracks under the weight of its own density, satellite images began to reveal a regular anomaly. Beneath the layers of salt lies a network of angles, lines, and arcs. It's as if someone had designed a city and sunk it into the mineral. Geophysicists believe this is a fossil layer, but drilling to a depth of more than 10 meters revealed fragments of clay processed by human hands. One of the archaeologists working on the site described how, upon uncovering certain layers, the air began to change. There was a sense of pressure inside, and the instruments recorded fluctuations in humidity. There was no water or source of evaporation anywhere. It felt as if someone had opened a sealed capsule. Local tribal legends avoid directly mentioning this area, but one tale mentions a place where the dead do not rot. There, they say, those who did not want to be buried remained, and those who entered this place never died. They merely stopped. In 2007, a team of Iranian scientists conducted a test drilling. At a depth of 27 meters, they discovered a perfectly rectangular stone slab with a carved pattern reminiscent of spiral paths. Some researchers compared it to a microchip. When the wafer was brought to the surface, the surrounding temperature dropped sharply. One of the technicians lost consciousness. Later, he had no memory of the drilling or what had happened before. Documents about this incident disappeared from the university archives. Only a copy of the report, sent to a private research center in Europe, remains. It states that the stove was impossible to heat. It remained cold even when placed in a heating chamber. Some are certain. There's no city beneath the salt. It's just an outline, a shape carved from a plan never intended for habitation, but for storage. And if the salt has covered it, it's not erosion, it's insulation. Now, no one goes near that area. The instruments don't work, the equipment gets stuck, and even the birds avoid it. It's on the maps, but in their minds, they try to forget it. Because perhaps what's hidden beneath this crystalline shell isn't the past, but something that shouldn't return. And the city beneath the salt isn't a mistake of nature, but the mark of a hand that knew that sometimes knowledge can't be destroyed. It can only be frozen. Oracle from the underground city of Nushabad. Hidden beneath the narrow streets of the Iranian city of Nushabad lies an ancient system of passages and chambers carved into the rock. These dungeons were created not as a refuge from enemies, but as a labyrinth in which even sound begins to fear its own reflection. Some call them simply tunnels of salvation, but locals pass down a completely different version from generation to generation. There was a hall below that listened, and sometimes answered. It's not listed on any maps. It's inaccessible by the usual route. All references to it are fragmentary. Legends say that to get there, you must go without light, without a map, and without asking. Just when you're no longer sure why you came down, you turn around, and the entrance is open. A narrow opening leading into a doorless stone chamber. No windows, no exit. There, they say, you can ask one question, but you can't say it out loud. Otherwise, the answer won't come, or the wrong one. In 1994, an archaeological team consisting of 2 Iranian students and a German photographer descended 40 meters below. The communication device began jamming. The signal was distorted and returned as an echo, even with the microphone turned off. They found a semicircular room, in the center of which lay a jug, completely blackened inside. Not a single candle, not a single piece of coal, only traces of soot on the walls and strange indented symbols on the floor, which no one could later match to any known language. The photographer took several photos, none of them developed, but on one roll of film, a subtle vibration of sound remained, as if the camera had captured sound rather than light. As the speed increased, this noise transformed into a faint female voice, speaking indistinctly but in a steady rhythm, like a mantra. The next day, the group left the city. One of the students disappeared. The second was later found in a state of amnesia, repeating one word in Farsi. Not mine, not mine, not mine. After this, the level below 30 meters in the Nushabad dungeons was closed, officially for safety reasons, unofficially because several workers refused to go down even for money. One said, "It's not a stone, it's an ear." Some researchers suggest the hall was built as a receptacle for consciousness, where questions are shaped not by speech but by presence, a place where thought becomes form and form becomes echo. And if you ask something sincerely but without words, you will get an answer. Once, and only once. After that, you won't be able to repeat the question because you'll forget it, or you'll cease to be the one who asked it. Today, the search for the oracle is over, but every time someone gets lost in the deep chambers of Nushabad, rescuers notice something strange. They move forward without a flashlight, silently, slowly. It's as if someone is calling or waiting, and perhaps the question has already been asked. All that remains is to wait for the stone to decide to answer. Once, without words, without turning back. Unburied dead from Tepe Sialk. In 1930, archaeologists began excavations on the Tepe Sialk Plateau, one of the oldest settlements in Persia. They found the remains of buildings, pottery, and jewelry. But the strangest discovery lay deeper, at a level where, according to geological strata, no remains should have been found. The team stumbled upon a chamber containing undecomposed bodies. These were adult men and women, fully clothed, lying in a precise, seemingly ritualistic order, heads facing south, arms at their sides. Their skin was blackened, but not decayed. The eye sockets were empty, but the shape of the eyeballs was preserved. It was as if decomposition had stopped at a specific moment, and everything inside had remained intact ever since. Not a single piece of fabric had turned to dust. Not a single piece of jewelry had oxidized. Even the wooden amulets remained intact, despite the humidity and pressure, but most importantly, their faces. Every expression was the same, not fear, not pain, but something resembling surprise, or something recognized too late. Scientists were unable to explain the body's state of preservation. The soil's chemical composition was unsuitable for mummification. The temperature was unstable. Radiation levels were normal. Later, one of the lab technicians admitted that when opening the chamber, he smelled not decomposition, but iron, as if someone had spilled mercury. Some bodies bore tattoos that had disappeared from other representatives of that era. No one recognized the symbols, but later, one Orientalist matched them with the patterns on the entrances to temples dedicated to Atar, the fire spirit. Only here, the symbols were distorted, as if someone had tried to disrupt the order. In 1979, further excavations were banned, officially for reasons of restoration. Unofficially, after one of the researchers began seeing the faces of the dead in his dreams, no longer in the ground, but in his own apartment. He said they were looking, but not at him, but through him. Later, in a private publication, he wrote, "They weren't dead, they just didn't come back." Today, access to the lower layers of Tepe Sialk is closed, but from time to time, ground-penetrating radars again detect anomalous densities. Densities consistent with human bodies, in positions that shouldn't be found in these layers. As if they were placed there not millennia ago, but recently, or perhaps not placed there at all, simply already recorded. And if this isn't a burial, then it's not death. It's waiting. Maybe they're not buried because they haven't finished watching yet. Not because they're dead, but because something remains unfinished, or someone hasn't yet descended upon them. A guard at the foot of Behistun Rock. Behistun is a sacred site, home to one of the most ancient inscriptions in history, a decree of Darius I carved into a sheer cliff face. It is an official testimony of power, victory, and order. But nearby, in the shadow of this monumental message, lies something they don't tell you about on tours. On the lower level of the rock mass, slightly off to the side of the royal carving, there is a figure, unmarked, unlabeled, uncatalogued. It resembles a human being, but only partially. The arms are too long, the head is elongated, the proportions don't correspond to the anatomy of any known culture. There is no facial expression, only deep indentations where eyes should be. Official reports call it an unformed rock deformation, yet its height is precise, 2 meters 23 centimeters. Its location is precisely opposite sunrise on the vernal equinox. A coincidence? Then why is there no shadow at the base of the figure at the peak of the daylight? In 1935, a German archaeologist described her in his personal notes as Unbekannter Beobachter, unknown observer. He wrote that standing next to the figure was difficult. An internal pressure appears at the level of the stomach. It's as if you're not looking at her, but she's pressing inward with her gaze. Since then, the object has remained largely ignored. But in 2008, a young researcher from Tabriz decided to study the structure in more detail. She used a laser scanner and produced a 3D model. When compared with images of guardians from other civilizations, it became clear that the figure's pose replicates the structure of the Sumerian figurine found in Ur, but in a mirror image, as if a reflection, or an opposite. She later noticed that the object showed no signs of natural wear. While the rest of the rock had eroded, the figure remained perfectly smooth, as if it had either been carved later or protected. But it was not covered in anything. At night, according to several workers, the figure flickers. It doesn't glow. It seems to pulse, very slowly. One of them refused to return to the excavation after this. He said, "It saw me. I shouldn't have looked." Some believe the figure is not a dedication, but a memorial, that it was carved not in honor of anyone, but as a marker of presence. Perhaps it is not a person, or even a deity, but something that was watching when Darius's text was written, or earlier, or always. And if the rock speaks with the voice of empire, then the figure next to it speaks with silence. And in this silence, there is not emptiness, but attention. Because not everything carved in stone wants to be read. Sometimes it simply waits for you to come closer, to see not the form, but the eye sockets that are already looking from the other side. Mirror from the vein of the earth. In 1972, in a mountainous region near Zanjan, a group of speleologists discovered a crevice within which gleamed something resembling a massive slab of black stone. It wasn't set into the rock, it was part of the bedrock, as if the mountain itself had sprouted this smooth body. The surface was polished to a mirror shine, but no faces were reflected in it. Only silhouettes, and only those behind the observer. An attempt to photograph the plate was unsuccessful. The camera either failed to capture the light or produced a frame in which the entire space behind the observer appeared scorched, without shadows, without detail. One of the films captured only a faint pulsation, as if the light emanated from within the stone rather than reflecting the outside. When attempting to touch the surface, a sensation arose similar to touching skin, with a rebound. It was as if the surface were breathing, but not outward, but inward. One of the cavers, touching the mirror, felt his own shadow on the wall stop as he moved. The video showed that for 3 seconds, his shadow was out of sync with his body. When they attempted to partially excavate the slab, the tool malfunctioned. The drill bit cracked and the metal crumbled. Geochemists later stated that the substance had not been identified. It didn't conduct electricity, but it wasn't an insulator either. It didn't absorb moisture, but it repelled it without a hydrophobic layer. Locals said the stone belongs to the one who looks behind one's back. One old woman asserted, "It's not a mirror, it's a gaze into which a mold has been accidentally inserted." A later report suggested that the plate might not be an object, but a membrane, filtering reality rather than reflecting it. One of the researchers called it an instrument of expanded memory. Supposedly it shows not what is, but what the observer might remember if their memory weren't limited by the body. The samples failed to be cut, but the legend remained. One man, having gazed into it for too long, no longer spoke. He sat at the entrance to the crevice, always with his back to the mirror, and whispered, "I'm not there. He's there. I stayed." Currently, the location on the map is hidden beneath an industrial zone, but infrared satellite images record not a reflection in the crevice, but a lack of temperature. It's as if the mirror isn't involved in thermodynamics, as if it's there, but from a different layer. And every time someone steps in front of it, it waits for them to stay. Forever. In a reflection that isn't there. Tower of Silence in the Yazd Desert. Amid the merciless and arid desert of central Iran, stone hills rise, crowned by circular structures that at first glance might appear to be the ruins of ancient fortresses or observation posts. But those who approach these somber stone rings immediately sense something different in the air. Not military, but ritual, imbued with silence and memory. These places are called Towers of Silence, and the most famous of them stand near the city of Yazd, one of the oldest centers of Zoroastrianism. It was here, far from the hustle and bustle, that some of the most unusual funeral rites in human history took place. Rites that still evoke controversy, anxiety, and mystical awe. Zoroastrians, one of the world's oldest religions, believed that earth, fire, and water were sacred and should not be desecrated. The ashes of the dead could not be buried, as this was considered desecration. Therefore, special circular structures, dakmas, or towers of silence, were built for the dead. They were erected on elevated sites so that the body of the deceased remained inaccessible to the living and yet open to the heavens. At the top of the tower was a stone platform divided into 3 concentric circles. The bodies of men were placed in the outer row, women in the middle, and children in the inner. There, under the scorching desert sun, the terrible yet sacred process of decomposition began, intended to cleanse the soul from the mortal body. The most mysterious element of this ritual were the birds of prey. A flock of vultures, as if sensing the moment, would emerge from the silent sky and perch on the tower. Their beaks and talons accelerated the process of decomposition, reducing the body to a skeleton in just a few hours. In Zoroastrian tradition, this was considered a sacred purification. The birds acted as intermediaries between earth and sky, between the world of the living and the world of spirits. The bones were then collected and placed in a deep central well lined with stone. There they remained until the sun and wind finally eroded them into dust. To modern eyes, such a practice seems terrifying and cruel. But for Zoroastrians, it was a way to protect the sacred elements from impurity. A corpse was believed to be a repository of evil and decay, and therefore should not be mixed with either water or soil. The Tower of Silence became an intermediate point between death and eternity, a place where the body surrendered to the forces of nature, and the soul continued its journey into the world of light. Today, the Towers of Silence of Yazd stand abandoned, their tops empty, and only the wind blows sand along the circular walls. The rituals, practiced for millennia, were banned in the mid-20th century when Iranian authorities passed laws on sanitary standards and burials. Zoroastrians were forced to find new forms of ritual. Now, bodies are placed in concrete sarcophagi or buried in closed tombs to preserve the tradition of elemental purity. However, the towers remain standing, like stone witnesses to another time. Locals say birds often circle above the towers at night, even though there are no more bodies. Some consider this a mere coincidence. The birds remember the scents that have lingered in these places for centuries. Others claim that the souls of the dead return as shadows of wings. Tourists who decide to climb to the top sometimes describe a strange sensation, as if the air becomes thicker, as if sounds disappear, leaving only the ringing of silence, frozen between the stone and the desert. Towers of Silence are not only ritual monuments, but also symbols of a different logic of life and death. They demonstrate how people in different cultures sought to resolve the eternal question: what to do with the body after the soul departs? For Zoroastrians, the answer was clear. The body must be freed, given over to nature, without disturbing the harmony of the elements. And it was this faith that gave birth to architectural forms that today seem simultaneously alien and majestic. The Yazd Desert is home to dozens of such towers, but the most famous are 2 perched on hills near the city. Their stone walls, darkened by sun and wind, still hold their shape, as if the elements themselves are protecting them from destruction. From the top, a view opens onto the city, where narrow streets and the domes of ancient houses stand side by side with modern buildings. This clash of eras highlights how closely ancient and modern exist here. The Tower of Silence in Yazd is more than just an archaeological site or a tourist attraction. It's a place where one can feel the breath of ancient faith, sense the vast and profound differences in views on death, and reflect on how, for some, this terrifying rite was an expression of respect for nature and a desire for purity, while for others, it remains a chilling mystery. And when you stand there on the windswept summit, where the fate of bodies and souls was once decided, you realize the name of this place was not chosen by chance. Silence truly reigns here, thick, resonant, and eternal. Book of Jade. In one of the closed rooms of an old Zoroastrian temple near Kerman, while clearing a collapsed archive, workers discovered an object unlike any known ritual artifact. It was a massive block of translucent green stone, similar to jade, polished to a shine. It wasn't just heavy, It was impossibly heavy. 3 men could barely move it, despite its modest size. There were no symbols on the surface, only indentations resembling lines. But under a certain frequency of light, a narrow ultraviolet spectrum, words began to appear, changing with the viewing angle. In one position, lines of Pahlavi script. In another, images resembling waveforms. In a third, symbols incompatible with any writing system. Scientists who studied the object stated that the text is not fixed. It reacts to the person reading it. One researcher saw only one phrase on the first page. Now you already knew. The second was a description of dreams he had never told anyone. The third was nothing but emptiness. The stone refused to open up to everyone equally. It was later discovered that the block's surface exhibited abnormal thermal conductivity. It always remained cold to the touch, even when placed in a heated room. An attempt to X-ray it yielded an image of a second structure within, like a book within a book, but the angle of refraction prevented penetration. A Zoroastrian legend says, "The true text is not written, it is remembered." Perhaps this book is not a text in the conventional sense, but a reflection of thoughts captured not by ink, but by resonance. Like a trace in glass, formed not by hand, but by intention. One of the researchers, shortly after working with the artifact, disappeared without a trace. His laptop remained on. A blank document appeared on the screen, but when the contrast was adjusted, the words appeared. "I saw what would happen if I chose." The artifact is currently not on display. It is kept in a private collection, access to which is prohibited, but rumor has it that the stone has begun to change. Cracks have appeared inside, unreflected on the surface. Some believe it writes itself, not with words, but with tension, as if the stone itself were waiting for someone to finally read it, not with their eyes, but with their intention. Because perhaps this book isn't meant to be read, it's meant to be understood. It doesn't speak of the future, it reflects on the consequences of the present, and if you're reading it, you're already within this chain. Even if you haven't chosen yet, the stone already knows, and it's waiting for you to know too. A staircase in the rock leading to nowhere. In a mountain range near Kazvin, among cracks in a sheer cliff, tourists stumbled upon perfectly carved steps. At first glance, they seemed to be part of an ancient temple or a caravan route, but after just a few meters, the stairs descended into the rock at an unnatural angle, as if they were descending not into the mountain, but into the very structure of space itself. Archaeologists were called in. At first there was enthusiasm. The stone was polished, there were no tool marks, and the width of the steps perfectly matched the proportions of a human gate. But there were no railings, no notches, no relief that would indicate its purpose. No people who inhabited this area had left any records of such forms. At a depth of about 90 meters, the staircase ends. Not into a cavity, not into a hall, but into a smooth, perfectly vertical wall, without cracks, without seams, without echo. If you speak, the sound does not return. One of the students accompanying the expedition described it. Even your own silence is alien there. An attempt to scan the rock from the outside revealed no anomaly, but a scan from the inside revealed another 17 meters of void behind the wall. However, the shape of this cavity doesn't match the rock's geometry. It seems to be inwardly curved, as one engineer described it. Something about the geometry there doesn't follow logic. Later, a team of seismologists was brought in to conduct the study. They discovered that near the staircase, seismic waves were distorted, as if resonating with something on the other side. But the stone blocked the drill. Not a single drill bit left a mark. It was as if matter were not stone, but frozen space. Locals avoid this place. One shepherd said, "Those who go down don't always return as those who came down." When asked if he'd seen it himself, he replied, "I don't know if they came back. They spoke, but it wasn't their voice." Rumor has it that the staircase isn't a structure, but rather a marker for a point where a transition occurred. A transition of what is unclear, between worlds, between time, between perceptions. Some say it's an archive, built not to store objects, but to store actions. The steps are like a record of intention, and each person who descends adds a step. But if you descend without intention, you won't reach the destination. You'll simply disappear, not into space, but into your route. The staircase will remain. There will be no trace, because you become part of what it leads inward, but doesn't return, hidden well in Pasargadae. Among the gently rolling hills where the ancient capital of Cyrus the Great's great empire stood, Archaeologists have discovered not only palaces and temple foundations, but also strange vertical shafts extending deep into the earth. Pasargadae has always been considered a symbol of royal power, the birthplace of the idea of a unified state. But the existence of these wells remains controversial. Some consider them part of a water supply system, while others believe they are more than just an engineering feat. At first glance, the shafts resemble ordinary qanats, the underground canals typical of Iran, but their location and shape are quite unusual. In some places, they lead directly beneath palace complexes, as if they were designed to conceal or store something important. Legends gathered by locals claim that the wells contain secret scrolls and golden vessels, hidden by clerics after the fall of the empire. There were even rumors of staircases leading downwards, only to disappear into the sand. Modern researchers have attempted to peer into these shafts using cameras and sensors, but have consistently encountered obstacles. In some places, the passages were blocked by rock. In others, they were flooded with water that seemed to come from nowhere. Geologists have been unable to explain the stable moisture levels. In a desert region where rainfall is almost non-existent, the water in the well remains constant for decades, neither increasing nor decreasing. This phenomenon has strengthened the belief that the shaft has a special purpose. There are also theories that the well served as a symbolic entrance to the underworld. Zoroastrian priests may have used it as a ritual site for communing with divine powers. In the silence and darkness, surrounded by the coolness of the stone, they lowered vessels of oil and stone tablets into it, hoping that their prayers would reach Ahura Mazda. Archaeological evidence for this is scant, but the very location of the shafts within the sacred areas of the complex supports this hypothesis. Some researchers have gone further, suggesting that the hidden well was a vault built to conceal the empire's power from enemies. It could have contained war trophies, treasures, or even documents confirming Cyrus's reign. The lack of finds only heightens the mystery. Perhaps someone in ancient times managed to remove all the valuables and deliberately concealed the shaft itself. Another theory is that the well connected to underground tunnels leading to distant hills. For travelers to Pasargadae, the wells appear to be simply dark holes in the ground, surrounded by stonework. But lingering nearby, a strange sensation arises, as if a whisper of wind or a distant echo rises from the depths. Locals often tell stories of hearing footsteps near the wells or seeing a faint glow, although there is no source of light. All this makes the shafts not only an archaeological site, but also a mystical center where people come for a sense of mystery. Today, scientists are striving to preserve these sites from destruction. Despite the limited scope of official excavations, debates about the well's purpose continue. For some, they are evidence of the Persians' advanced engineering skills. For others, they are a window into another world, a relic of a forgotten faith. But in any case, the hidden well of Pasargadae remains part of a great history, where the stone holds more secrets than modern instruments can reveal. And while the depths remain silent, the mystery remains alive, simultaneously captivating and disturbing. Marble Door in the Zagros Mountains. The high Zagros ridges are riddled with caves, fissures, and ancient traces of human habitation. But one discovery stands out among them, one that remains a mystery to this day. It's the so-called Marble Door, a perfectly carved opening in the rock that leads neither to a cave nor to another chamber, but instead to a void in the stone. Against the rugged contours of the mountains, this opening appears unnaturally smooth. Its edges are smooth, as if polished, and the surface of the wall reflects light as if it had been processed with modern tools. Researchers who visited the site noted that the shape of the opening was too regular to be a random crack. The width and height of the opening resemble a real door designed to accommodate a person's height. However, there is no tunnel or corridor behind it, just a few meters of stone mass, as if someone had begun construction of an entrance but stopped, leaving behind the eternal illusion of a passage. Some scholars speculate that it may have been an unfinished cult object, perhaps a sacrificial altar or a symbolic portal through which the soul was supposed to pass into the afterlife. Local legends ascribe a more sinister significance to this door. Elders in the villages at the foot of the mountains say that at night the door seems to glow with a pale light and a faint humming sound can be heard from within. This was believed to be the voice of those once locked within. According to legend, in ancient times, shamans or priests could use such closed gates to isolate evil spirits, imprisoning them within the stone. Since then, no one dares touch these walls. It is believed that any disruption to the balance could release what lies hidden behind the marble facade. Archaeologists have attempted to explain the origin of the anomaly. Some believe the door was formed by the unique structure of the rock. A vein of marble cut through the limestone layers, and natural weathering created the appearance of an artificial opening. Others hypothesize that it is indeed the work of ancient builders, possibly even before the formation of the Persian Empire. This version is supported by the traces of potholes on the edges. They resemble impacts from tools, although on such hard rock, simple tools should have left completely different damage. Most disturbing is the fact that animal bones have repeatedly been found near the door, as if they were brought here for sacrifice. This suggests that the mysterious object was used in rituals even centuries after its creation. Tourists who have decided to climb to the door describe a strange sensation. Standing directly in front of it, they seem to hear their own echo, even though there is no nearby cave to reflect the sound. It seems as if the stone breathes and responds to their touch. Today, the marble door in Zagros remains a symbol of an unsolved mystery. Some see it as the work of ancient engineers, others as evidence of mystical practices, and still others call it simply a trick of nature. But when you look at this smooth opening amidst the wild rocks, it's hard to believe it was a coincidence. It seems like a frozen portal, an unknown path leading not to physical space, but to another reality, one that ancient people revered and feared. Fire temple without fire in Persepolis. Persepolis, the majestic capital of the Achaemenids, has long been a symbol of ancient power and lost grandeur. Among the ruins of palaces, columns, and carved staircases, there is one site that raises more questions than it answers. It is called the Fire Temple, although archaeologists have never found a single trace of fire here. For the Zoroastrian tradition, this sounds almost impossible. The cult of light and sacred flame has always been at the center of faith, and any sanctuary was required to contain an altar where an eternal flame burned. But in Persepolis stands a temple whose walls are silent, and whose stone hearths remain empty. The building itself is striking in its proportions. The stone blocks are laid with incredible precision. The ceiling tiles seem to hover above the columns, and in the center is a massive platform, which most researchers initially mistook for an altar. However, nothing was found here among the layers of ash typically left behind by sacrifices or rituals. There's no ash, no charred bones, no traces of the resin or oil that fueled the sacred flame. It seems the temple was never used for its intended purpose, though its architecture undoubtedly points to its sacred nature. Some scholars have suggested that this was not a fire temple, but rather a temple of silence and light, where worship was conducted without physical fire, through the reflection of the sun's rays. This theory is supported by special openings in the walls through which, on certain days of the year, the sun's rays passed and fell directly upon the central platform. Perhaps this invisible fire was considered a manifestation of the deity here. But then, why do we not encounter such a solution anywhere else in the empire? Local legends ascribe a completely different purpose to the temple. It was believed that the priests there summoned not heavenly light, but the powers of the underworld. This is why fire was never lit here. It symbolized purity, and the rituals there were rumored to be associated with darkness and shadows. It was said that the priests used the stone platform as a gateway for spirits, and this is why, after the fall of Persepolis, no one dared approach these walls at night. Tourists and researchers still report strange sensations. The air inside the building seems denser than outside, and footsteps echo loudly with even the slightest movement. From a scientific perspective, the temple could have served as an observatory or a hall for royal ceremonies, but the fact remains. There are no traces of fire or sacrifices here. Perhaps this was an attempt to create a special form of worship, the veneration of light without the material flame. Perhaps it was a place where only a select few were invited to witness not a ritual, but the very presence of the divine. Today, the fireless temple remains one of the greatest mysteries of Persepolis. Its walls stand silent, its stone surfaces retain traces of ancient carvings, but they offer no answers. Every step here reminds us that even in the heart of a great empire, secrets could exist, hidden not only from ordinary people, but also from posterity. And when the sun falls upon the platform, illuminating it with a golden glow, it becomes clear. Perhaps this was precisely the true ritual, a fire that never burned in the material world, but was always part of the heavenly light. Labyrinth under the ruins of Ecbatana. Ecbatana, the ancient capital of Media, lay at the foot of the Zagros Mountains and was once considered one of the most impregnable cities of antiquity. According to ancient authors, its walls rose in rings, encircling the city ever higher, until at the summit stood the royal palace, resplendent with gold and jewels. But what lay beneath these walls remains far more mysterious. Archaeologists and travelers exploring the ruins have repeatedly found hints of a network of underground corridors that stretched far beyond the ancient city. These passages form a veritable labyrinth, not fully explored and still daunting in its incomprehensible complexity. Many of the tunnels are cut directly into the rocky ground. Their walls are smooth, as if polished, and the ceilings are often so low that one must crawl to progress. Some corridors drop off into nothingness, revealing narrow shafts below, where, even by the light of lanterns, pitch darkness reigns. Those who have dared to explore these depths have noted a completely different sense of space there. Sounds are distorted, footsteps echo loudly, and the air becomes thick and heavy. It's as if the walls themselves retain the memory of millennia gone by and are reluctant to admit strangers. According to legend, the labyrinth beneath Ecbatana was built to conceal royal treasures and secret archives. Herodotus wrote of the wealth of the Median rulers, and many believed that part of these vast reserves of gold and silver were hidden underground. Later, Persian kings may have used the passages as secret passages between palaces and military warehouses. But the strangest thing is that not a single expedition has been able to create a complete map of the underground passages. Each time, explorers encounter dead ends, blockages, and mysterious turns leading nowhere. Locals avoid these places, believing them cursed. They say footsteps and knocking sounds can still be heard in the labyrinths, as if someone invisible were still wandering in the darkness. Tourists who decided to risk penetrating deeper often returned in a panic, claiming to have lost their bearings even in places where the path seemed straight. There are stories of some explorers never returning at all, disappearing into these corridors, which seem to engulf strangers and erase their traces. Scholarly theories also differ. Some believe the labyrinth to be a drainage system or catacombs built to store supplies during sieges. Others believe it to be a sacred space associated with religious rites or sacrifices. However, the mystery remains. Why is the network so complex, and why do many corridors lead to dead ends, as if they were specifically built to confuse and deter outsiders? Today, Ecbatana is known as an archaeological site, but its underground labyrinth remains a symbol of how, even beneath the layers of time, lie secrets beyond our comprehension. It seems these passages were created not for humans, but to guard a strange, inaccessible secret that must never be revealed. And when you stand at the entrance to one of the tunnels, the darkness draws you in as strongly as it repels you, a reminder that there are places where history prefers to remain silent. Well of eternal water in Dasht-e-Kavir. In the heart of the Iranian desert of Dasht-e-Kavir, where the earth is cracked by the heat and the horizon trembles in a haze, stands a well that defies the very logic of nature. In this region, rainfall is extremely rare, rivers disappear before reaching the plains, and even underground qanats often dry up, turning into useless mines. But there's one spring known only to locals, a well whose water never diminishes, no matter how much is drawn. It's called Eternal, and this name has lived on for generations, passed down orally as part of a local secret. The well itself doesn't look particularly impressive. It's a round hole in the ground, lined with stone, the depth of which is unknown. The ropes lowered by explorers reached tens of meters down, but never reached the bottom. Its water is always uniformly cool, clear, and surprisingly fresh, as if freshly filled by rain clouds. Archaeologists exploring the area attempted to explain the phenomenon through natural causes, suggesting the presence of a hidden underground river. But no such aquifer has been identified in the area, and hydrologists admit that the source remains unexplained. There are many legends about the well's origins. Some claim it was dug by priests during the Achaemenid era to provide water for caravans crossing the desert. Others say the spring appeared spontaneously on the night a comet flashed across the sky and the earth trembled, opening a crack from which water gushed. The most ancient legend connects the well with Zoroastrian rites. Supposedly, priests summoned the sacred stream to protect the purity of the fire in the temple, and the water has never dried up since. Travelers who have visited the well report a strange sensation, as if the air becomes thicker and sounds become muffled. Those who have tasted the water claim it provides an extraordinary sense of lightness and seems to relieve fatigue after a long journey. Stories circulate in the villages about sick people being cured after drinking from this spring. However, there's also a superstition. You shouldn't take the water with you, otherwise it quickly loses its properties and misfortune befalls the traveler. Scientists tried to analyze the water's chemical composition and found it to be close to ideal. No impurities, no excess salt deposits typical of the region. This discovery only deepened the mystery, as the surrounding desert is known for its toxic salt flats, where water becomes unusable within a few hours. But in this well, it has remained crystal clear for centuries. Some researchers have even suggested that the water comes not from the Earth's layers, but from deep reservoirs connected to ancient tectonic faults. Today, the Well of Eternal Water remains a place of pilgrimage. It was surrounded by stone, but no one built temples or walls here. The spring itself is considered sacred. Local residents forbid digging nearby and even prohibit making noise near it. Too many horror stories surround those who disturb the well's peace. Some of these stories sound like warnings. Travelers who decided to spend the night near the water disappeared without a trace, and caravans that lingered too long seemed to vanish into the endless desert. And when you stand at the edge, peering into the dark depths, where only the faint glow of the sky is reflected, it becomes clear. Before you is more than just a source of moisture. This is a gateway to something greater, a symbol of how even the most dead land can conceal a secret that defies both science and time. The Well of Eternal Water remains the living heart of the desert, which continues to beat despite its merciless breathing. Stone lions from Hamadan. On the outskirts of the ancient city of Hamadan, which was once the capital of Media and the most important center of the Persian Empire, two mysterious stone monoliths rise. They are called the Lions of Hamadan, although at first glance they resemble massive boulders roughly hewn from a single stone. But upon closer inspection, shapes emerge within the outlines of these boulders: paws, a mighty chest, and a powerful head. These lions have survived centuries, wars, and destruction, but they have never revealed their secret, why and by whom they were created. Historians debate the origin of the lions. Some date them to the era of Alexander the Great, claiming they may have been part of a monument honoring his comrade Hephaestion, who died in Ecbatana, where Hamadan was located. Others link the monuments to the Seleucid period, or even earlier, when the Median kings adorned their palaces with symbols of power and grandeur. However, a precise dating remains elusive, and the lack of written sources only deepens the mystery. The lion's architectural features are no less strange. Their proportions are crude and unusual for classical Persian sculpture, which was typically distinguished by refined carving and harmonious forms. Here, however, we see massive figures, as if deliberately weighted, lacking grace, yet possessing a particularly stern power. Scholars speculate that they may have stood at the entrance to a vast complex, perhaps a palace or temple, serving as guardians and protectors. This version is supported by their location. Both monoliths once faced each other, as if greeting everyone who entered the sacred territory. But if the lions truly were guardians, then who or what were they protecting? No significant ruins consistent with such an entrance have yet been found in Hamadan. This has led to the hypothesis that the lions were part of a long-lost complex, lost to time or destroyed by conquerors. Some researchers even suggest that the lions could have been part of a funerary structure, symbolically guarding the peace of a king or military leader. Local legends paint an even darker picture. One story holds that the lions are not simply stone monuments, but creatures turned to stone for violating ancient laws. They were supposedly guardians of the city, but one day they betrayed it and were encased in stone as punishment. Since then, they have stood motionless, gazing in the direction where palaces and temples once stood. At night, elders say, their eyes begin to glow, and dull thumps can be heard from beneath their paws, as if a heart within the stone continues to beat. During 20th century archaeological research, the Hamadan lions underwent repeated restoration, but their condition remains alarming. The stone has been eroded by time, many details have been erased, and only the general outline allows us to understand the creator's intentions. Despite this, they continue to attract the attention of tourists and researchers. Standing next to them, it's hard not to feel a special atmosphere, a sense that these guardians truly know more than they let on. There are also more unusual theories. Some scholars suggest that the lions may have been part of an astronomical complex. Their orientation relative to the mountains and the horizon could have been used to observe the movements of the sun and stars. They may have served as landmarks and rituals associated with the solstices and equinoxes. However, no evidence has yet been found for this hypothesis, and it remains on the borderline of conjecture and mysticism. The lions of Hamadan have become an important symbol of the city. Their images can be found on souvenirs, books, and tourist posters, but the monuments themselves remain silent. For residents, they are more than just stone figures, but a connection to ancient history, proof that their land remembers the times when the history of great powers was made here. However, something else is worrying. No one knows how long the lions will be able to withstand the ravages of time. Without serious restoration, they risk losing the last of their features, turning into faceless stone blocks. And then humanity will lose not only a monument, but also the key to one of the most important mysteries of Iranian history. Standing at the foot of these stone guardians, a strange feeling overcomes you. It seems as if they look through the centuries, have witnessed the fall of kingdoms and the rise of new empires, heard the footsteps of warriors and the prayers of priests, and now silently observe the flow of the modern city. Their silence conceals a story that will never be fully told. And this is precisely what makes them so enigmatic. The lions of Hamadan are more than just ruins. They are a question humanity has yet to answer. Silver sarcophagus from Tepe Hasanlu. In northwestern Iran, in a hilly area near the border with Azerbaijan, archaeologists have excavated the ancient site of Tepe Hasanlu. This site is renowned for its many finds, from ceramics to gold objects, including the famous golden cup decorated with mythological scenes. But the most disturbing mystery remains the missing silver sarcophagus, mentioned only in the records of early explorers. It was supposedly discovered among the ruins of the sanctuary, but before systematic excavations began, it vanished, as if lost in time. According to eyewitnesses' descriptions from the mid-20th century, the sarcophagus was made of massive silver slabs held together with bronze pins. Its surface was decorated with relief images, either scenes of military victories or symbolic animals standing at the points of the sun. Its size was large enough to contain a human body, and many speculated that the sarcophagus was intended for a ruler or priest. However, when scholars returned to the site several years later, the sarcophagus was gone. It has never resurfaced in museums or private collections anywhere. This story has given rise to numerous rumors. Some believe the sarcophagus was stolen and melted down, as silver has always been a source of profit, especially in unstable times when archaeological expeditions were not strictly guarded. Others believe the discovery was deliberately concealed to avoid an international scandal. In the mid-20th century, many artifacts from Iran were illegally exported abroad and ended up in private collections. Another theory, however, is that the sarcophagus was never stolen, but simply buried again, or hidden by local residents who feared the wrath of the spirits. What makes this story particularly mysterious is the lack of finds related to the burial itself. Sarcophagi typically contain bones, jewelry, or the remains of grave goods, but no mention of the contents has survived. Some archaeologists have even hypothesized that the sarcophagus was empty, created as a symbolic coffin for a deity or hero, whose soul was to be preserved in metal. In ancient cultures, silver was considered a material that connected the world of the living and the world of moonlight, meaning the sarcophagus could have served as a sacred vessel rather than simply a tomb. Local legends add fuel to the fire. Residents of nearby villages say that in the years after the sarcophagus was discovered, many saw a glowing nighttime light over the ruins. The hills seemed to glow from within, and a low, metallic humming sound could be heard in the air. Some claim that after the sarcophagus disappeared, this light vanished, as if the place had lost its energy. It was believed that the sarcophagus held the spirits of ancestors, or even the power of the city itself, and its disappearance disrupted the peace of the land. Modern researchers have tried to find at least some traces. Only vague references and reports have survived in the archives, but there are almost no photographs or detailed descriptions. This seems odd, given that other finds from Hasanlu were meticulously documented. This is why some historians suspect the sarcophagus may be a fabrication, a myth born from a fusion of scientific conjecture and local legends. But if so, why are references to it found in several independent sources? Today, The silver sarcophagus from Tepe Hassanlu remains a symbol of lost secrets. Perhaps it truly once existed and was stolen. Perhaps it lies deep underground, awaiting rediscovery. Or perhaps it was never a material object, but merely a legend created to explain strange phenomena among the ruins. But its history itself reminds us that archaeology is not only a science, but also a realm of myth, where the line between reality and imagination is thin and fluid. Standing amid the ruins of Tepe Hassanlu, where the walls of ruined houses rise like shadows of the past, it's easy to imagine that somewhere beneath your feet lies a sarcophagus, crafted of silver, shining in the darkness and concealing a secret that ancient craftsmen deliberately carried into eternity. And while this secret remains unsolved, Hassanlu continues to harbor a sense of something lost and unspoken, something that eludes our eyes but never vanishes from the Earth's memory. Jade amulet from Choga Zanbil. In southwestern Iran, amid the sands of Khuzestan, rise the ruins of Choga Zanbil, one of the greatest ziggurats of ancient Elam. This site is known for its terraces, temples, and brick walls, which bear inscriptions in Elamite and Akkadian. But among the many discoveries made by archaeologists in the mid-20th century, one artifact stands out, rarely discussed officially. It is a small jade amulet, the inscription of which remains unsolved and is the subject of debate among researchers. The amulet is shaped like an elongated oval, polished to a mirror shine. Its surface is decorated with rows of symbols resembling writing, but no regional language matches them. Some signs resemble hieroglyphs, others resemble geometric figures, and still others defy classification altogether. Scholars have attempted to compare them with the proto-writing of Mesopotamia and with drawings from the Indus Valley, but no parallel has yielded a clear result. The inscription appears to have been created by representatives of an unknown civilization that left its mark on the heart of Elam. The material is particularly interesting. Jade is virtually non-existent in these areas. The nearest deposits are thousands of kilometers away. This means the amulet was either brought from distant lands or was part of extensive trade links that have remained underappreciated by historians. However, local legends offer a different explanation. Jade was called the Stone of Heavenly Breath, believed to have fallen from the sky at a time when the gods opened the gates between worlds. This is why jade objects were considered sacred and imbued with special powers. Researchers hypothesize that the amulet was created not for decoration, but for rituals. Its shape and smoothness make it easy to hold in the palm of the hand, and the symbols could have been a prayer or a spell. Perhaps a priest carried it to address the deities or used it in rituals related to the protection of the city. But the mystery is that similar artifacts have not been found anywhere else in Elam. The amulet remains unique, as if it were created exclusively for Choga Zanbil or a specific individual. Locals tell a legend about the jade stone. They say the amulet couldn't be held in one's hands for long. It would heat up, as if alive, and begin to emit a faint glow. Elderly people claim that those nearby heard a soft ringing sound, like the twang of a string. Some believe this artifact was the key to a gate leading to another dimension, and that's why the priests hid it from prying eyes. Attempts to decipher the inscription on the amulet continue to this day. Modern scanning and analysis methods have confirmed that the symbols were engraved with incredible precision, even though the tools for such work seemingly did not exist at that time. Some researchers believe it is an early form of a language that disappeared without leaving any descendants. Others are convinced that the symbols are not writing at all, but rather sacred signs understood only by priests. The amulet's fate is also shrouded in mystery. After excavations, it was removed for study, but its exact location remains a secret. Some sources claim it is kept in a Tehran museum, while others claim it was transported abroad. Rumors circulate that the amulet, like many other rare finds, disappeared and is now kept in a private collection. This lack of access only heightens interest and fuels the wildest theories. Standing among the ruins of Choga Zanbil, where the bricks still bear the marks of ancient craftsmen, it's hard to shake the feeling that the amulet was part of something larger. Perhaps it was merely a personal talisman, or perhaps a key to knowledge lost millennia ago. Its inscription, still illegible, seems to address the future, a message we are not yet able to decipher. And while the jade amulet remains silent, Choga Zanbil holds its secret. This small object reminds us that even the most studied ruins can hide a mystery capable of changing our understanding of the past. Sunken palace in the Caspian Sea. The northern shores of Iran have long been shrouded in legend, but one of the most striking concerns, ruins that, according to eyewitnesses, can only be seen on certain nights when the Caspian Sea recedes. Fishermen and locals tell tales of dark outlines of columns and walls hidden beneath the waves, appearing momentarily before disappearing into the depths again. These apparitions are called the Sunken Palace, and for decades, stories have swirled around it, in which reality and myth are so closely intertwined that it is almost impossible to separate one from the other. According to ancient legends, the palace belonged to a king who, overcome with pride, built himself a residence right on the coastline, defying the elements. Its halls were paved with marble, its columns soared to the sky, and its ceilings reflected the glitter of jade inlays. But one day, the sea rebelled against human insolence. A violent storm lashed the palace, and the waves engulfed it and its inhabitants. Since then, on certain nights, when the moon reflects in the water in a peculiar way, the ruins emerge from the depths again, a reminder of the punishment meted out to pride. Archaeologists have repeatedly attempted to confirm these stories. In the 1960s, a group of researchers dived off the coast, hoping to discover traces of ancient architecture. Some claim to have seen fragments of columns and smooth lines of stonework underwater, unlike any natural formations. However, official reports were cautious. Strong currents, murky water, and the limited capabilities of the technology of the time prevented detailed investigations. Modern underwater surveys have also yielded inconclusive results. Occasionally, sonar has detected straight lines and anomalous shapes, but it has been impossible to prove that these are indeed the remains of a palace. Skeptics are convinced that natural structures, basalt slabs, and seafloor faults can explain everything. But for local residents, these explanations are irrelevant. For them, the palace exists, and they continue to tell stories passed down from generation to generation. The fishermen's stories create a special atmosphere. Many claim that on foggy nights, a bell-like ringing can be heard from beneath the water, and in the moonlight, shadows can be seen moving between the columns. Some believe them to be the ghosts of the dead, others, guardians protecting the palace's peace. There are even more grim stories. Ships that sailed too close to the supposed ruins were caught in powerful whirlpools and sank, as if the sea itself were protecting its secret. Legends link the palace not only to the king's hubris, but also to ancient religious cults. Some traditions claim it was built as a temple to the god of water, and was therefore doomed. The deity would not tolerate such daring gifts. Others believe it was a sanctuary for secret rituals, and the flooding was the result of a sacrifice that resulted in an eternal curse. Today, the sunken palace remains an unsolved mystery. Scientists debate whether further expeditions are worthwhile, as the Caspian Sea's water level constantly fluctuates, and many ancient settlements are already hidden beneath its surface. But even if the ruins are found, the answer to the main question remains. Was it a real palace, or merely a myth born of the imagination of people who saw their own fears and hopes reflected in the play of the waves? Standing on the shore of the Caspian Sea and gazing into its darkening surface, it's easy to understand why this legend has endured for so long. The water seems endless, its surface concealing thousands of stories, and the imagination filling in what the eye cannot see. Perhaps the palace truly lies beneath the waves, or perhaps it's just a mirage, but the very thought of the sea harboring entire cities makes the heart beat faster. The sunken palace in the Caspian Sea remains a mystery, one in which the majesty of ancient kings meets the incomprehensible power of the elements. Persia is more than just an ancient land. It is a memory that has not forgotten itself. The stones here not only lie, they watch. The towers not only lie crumbling, they listen. We followed 10 traces that don't fit into textbooks, but don't disappear from space. Something was hidden, something was deliberately forgotten. But not everything goes away, because there are secrets that continue to breathe in stone, in shadow, in reflection. They don't require faith, only silence. And if you listen carefully, perhaps you too are already a part of them. Even if you don't yet know what exactly you've begun to remember.